As outlined in the manuscript associated with this video, we used a design-based research process to identify 4 Competence Committee needs and 17 dashboard elements to meet those needs. In this video, I will provide an overview of the resulting Competency Committee dashboard while outlining the elements mapped to each of the 4 needs. Specifically, I will demonstrate elements of the dashboard designed to understand the data in context, explore other assessment data, explore workplace-based assessment data, and ensure the security of the data. To ensure that the data was understood in context, it needed to be organized effectively. From the top of the dashboard to the bottom, the data goes from broad to more specific. The rotation schedule has been placed right at the top of the screen so that the Competency Committee members can easily see what rotations the resident has just completed and which are upcoming. Overall metrics are presented at the top, provided by visuals of exam scores and Competency Committee feedback. Recent EPAs can also be reviewed here before moving into data on specific EPAs from specific stages. A date filter can be set to ensure that the Competency Committee can easily determine what data they have to review and what data has been reviewed previously. Other assessment data was also presented within the dashboard as it complemented the competency-based assessment data. In addition to mapping the outcomes of previous Competency Committee meetings to one of 5 categories, the narrative feedback provided to the resident following each Competency Committee meeting can be reviewed by mousing over each of the dots. Biannual written and annual oral exam scores are also available. As the written exams are reported as a single number with no additional context, they are simply mapped over time. The oral exams are a bit more complex in that they do come with feedback, and there are a greater number of individual cases with feedback. To address this, we created a drop-down menu that allows the selection of the year to view oral exam scores from that specific year. Each of the dots can then be moused over to see additional narrative and context information for that case. Workplace-based assessment data is a central feature of CBME and was the focus of most of our discussions with Competency Committee members. It is presented throughout the dashboard in multiple ways. EPA acquisition metrics are presented close to the top of the screen. Effectively, they outline how frequently our learners are being observed and receiving feedback. The number of expired EPAs is also indicated to provide some perspective on whether EPAs are not being requested or whether they are being requested but are not being completed. When the date filter is on, all of these metrics are presented both with numbers for since the resident began the program and for numbers within the specific filtered time interval. Competency Committee members requested additional comparative metrics. This graph demonstrates the number of EPAs per week, the total number of EPAs, or the number of expired EPAs for each resident. It can be filtered by stage, or include all residents, and it can show all data while also showing filtered data from a specific date range. The rotation schedule can provide additional contextual data. This information displays the number of EPAs that a resident had observed on each of their rotations. The percentage next to that value indicates whether that is higher or lower than what is expected for our program. The expected values were determined by the program director after they were made aware of the number of EPAs that had historically been observed on each of the rotations. These percentage values are color-coded such that receiving less than 25% of the expected number of observations is colored red, while receiving greater than 100% of the expected number of observations is green. Quantitative EPA data is presented for each EPA within our assessment program in a graphical format. In this graph, the lowest line corresponds with the statement, "I had to do," while the highest line corresponds with the statement, "I didn't have to be there," both of which are derived from the Ottawa entrustment score. With the date filter mentioned previously applied, the observations occurring within the filtered range occur as open diamonds as opposed to closed circles. By keeping the filtered observations visible, it is much easier to see the trends in the scores. It is also possible to highlight observations associated with a particular patient demographic or clinical presentation. This makes it easy for the Competency Committee to determine whether the breadth of the EPA has been observed and whether there are any aspects of it that the resident is struggling with. The narrative data associated with each EPA can be viewed either by mousing over a specific dot or by opening a table below the graph that displays the narrative data in a format that can be sorted and searched by entrustment store, date, or faculty member. Lastly, narrative observations that are distinct from EPAs can be reviewed at the bottom of the screen. These observations are presented in a simple tabular format and can be sorted or searched by date and faculty member. The final need identified by our Competency Committee was for the security of the educational assessment data. This is not associated with any specific dashboard elements. However, to address this need, the resident data presented within the dashboard is stored securely by our institution's Department of Computer Science. Access to the dashboard requires an institutional login. Taking these steps has satisfied the Competency Committee members that the data is secure and has even prevented the sharing of some assessment data via email, which further increases security. Thank you for taking the time to review our manuscript and video.